Thank you for inviting me. Today I'm very happy to be here and present our recent work. The topic of my presentation is deep causal inference modeling for travel behavior analysis. And today I'm gonna focus on the 5 main parts of our study. First of all, I'll talk about the behavioral modeling frameworks. Then I'll explain our methodology, how we integrate the traditional travel behavior analysis into deep learning algorithms, and then the causal inference techniques. Then I'll introduce our case study, and the results will be shown. And finally, I'll talk about our conclusion and the future works. I'd like to begin by talking about 3 main behavioral modeling frameworks: theory-driven approach, causal inference approach, and data-driven approach. Theory-driven approach have been widely used in different fields of studies, including transportation, to describe people's preference towards a specific behavior. And broadly, these approaches inform us about the determining factors in the selection process. The second approach is causal inference, which is used for assessing causal impact of any policies or changes in the system. And the third one is data-driven approach, deep learning and machine learning algorithm, which has recently led to the significant results in modeling, particularly prediction, by capturing the relationship between the variables directly from the data. Maybe causal inference is a bit new to us, so in this slide, I'm gonna clarify the focus of the causal inference. In causal inference, we try to measure the average treatment effect. In other words, we are interested in understanding the difference between the outcomes in the current system and the manipulated system. Another important thing in causal inference is that in causal inference, we try to overcome the effect of the confounding variables. In fact, some variables create another path between the treatment or policy and the outcome, known as a non-causal path. So in causal inference, we try to focus just on the causal path and eliminate the non-causal path between 2 variables of interest. Nowadays, we know that there is a growing interest towards using data-driven approach in travel behavior analysis and in transportation. However, there are 2 crucial debates over the performance of the machine learning algorithms: lack of interpretability and lack of causality. In terms of lack of causality, both the typical behavioral analysis and data-driven approach are association-based models, meaning that they measure the combination of the non-causal path and the causal path, and they don't isolate the non-causal path. So both of them lacks causality, and data-driven approach lacks interpretability, known as a black box in the literature. In terms of interpretability, researchers try to overcome a lack of interpretability by using 2 approaches in the literature in transportation, using the explainable artificial intelligence, and also completely integrate deep learning algorithms to travel behavioral modeling. In the first approach, researchers try to use surrogate models or use shape analysis to make the machine learning algorithms more interpretable. But in the second approach, we completely combine deep learning algorithms with the traditional travel behavior analysis to provide completely interpretable, a single interpretable model. And in terms of causality, different approaches used in different fields of study to add causality analysis to their evaluation. In econometric, statistic, and computer science, different methodologies have been used. For instance, in econometric, researchers focus on modeling the selection process by using the structural equation model or copular joint model. But in statistics, the approach is different. Researchers try to provide a balance between two groups, the treated and untreated groups, to create this balance and then compare these two groups. Because when they provide the balance between the two groups, the only difference between these two groups is the treatment. And so then they can compare the outcome between them. And nowadays, there is a growing interest towards using causality in machine learning algorithms, and different algorithms were proposed in the field of computer science to have the machine learning-based causal model. Different focus, goals, strength, and actually the limitation of these frameworks encourage us to think about the combination of these algorithms. Our study focuses on the discrete choice model, and we try to integrate the traditional travel behavior analysis into deep learning algorithms and also causal inference to not only keep the interpretability of our model, but also improve the accuracy of our model, relax modeler's assumption by using the deep learning algorithms, and also overcome the effect of the confounder and just measure, focus on the causal path between the variables for policy assessment. Now let's move on to our methodology. In our lab, to overcome the lack of interpretability, we propose ResNet-based model structure, including ResLogit and ordinal ResLogit. ResNet-based model structure is a deep learning version of discrete choice models used for both ordinal and categorical data sets. In the following slides, I'm going to explain how the ResNet-based model structure works. As you can see, in the utility function of this model, in addition to the deterministic part, we have another term, a residual deep component shown with the orange color, and this term captures the unobserved heterogeneity by using the residual layers. In fact, here we don't apply the deep learning into the whole system. We just apply the deep learning to the residual layer, and then based on the nature of the random variable, we predict the probability of each alternative. This figure shows how the ResNet-based model structure works. As you can see, in both ordinal ResLogit and ResLogit, the utility function is obtained when the deterministic term is passed through the residual layers. But the only difference between ordinal and the ResLogit is the crawl layer. Ordinal ResLogit has one more layer to reduce the problem to the binary classifier, and here each binary classifier is associated to the ordinal categories, and then we predict the ordinal alternatives. Detailed information about the structure of the ordinal ResLogit and ResLogit model can be found in our publication published in Transportation Part C and Journal of the Choice Model. Now I'm going to talk about the second part of our methodology, how we combine these models with causal inference techniques. In causality, we are interested to find the true causal impact between the variables, and also we want to know how the system behavior will change if we intervene in the system, in the counterfactual work. We propose a model named Carolina. Carolina consists of two frameworks: interpretable deep structural causal model and also generative counterfactual model structure. In interpretable deep structural causal model, first of all, we tried to learn the causal structure. We tried to identify the directed acyclic graph. What is directed acyclic graph? Directed acyclic graph is a graphical representation of the causal model. In this graph, the nodes represent the random variable and the edges between nodes represent the direct effect between them. Different approaches such as theories, our background, our knowledge, or results from previous study can be used to get the DAG. But in our study, we use the statistical analysis, causal discovery algorithms to find the DAG from the observational data. Different approaches can be used in causal discovery: constraint-based approach, score-based approach, asymmetrical distribution, and hybrid approach. However, in the literature, there is no any standard for choosing the best causal discovery algorithm. It completely depends on our problem, the complexity of our problem, and the size of our data set. So, the output of this first step of interpretable deep structural causal model is causal structure, shows how our variable interacts with each other, and based on this structure, we can find the confounder variables. In the second step, we try to mathematically model this causal mechanism by using the structural causal model. Each equation in each mechanism, in a structural causal mechanism, generates a random variable given its parts. However, in a structural causal modeling, we use res logit and ordinal res logit to use the capability of deep learning algorithm, and also again keep the interpretability of our model. So the outcome of this level is also causal association. Here, by this model, we can find the causal effect between the variables. This figure shows the structure of interpretable deep structural causal model. As you can see, we use causal discovery first of all to get the DAG from the data. Then, based on the confounder-based structure, we identify the confounder variables. Then this causal structure is fed to the structural causal model, and at the center for functions of the structural causal model, we use res logit and ordinal res logit. So far, we could isolate the non-causal path and measure the causal effect between the variables. However, if we want to use this model for policy assessment, we need to predict human behavior in the counterfactual model. Meaning that once we intervene in the system, any intervention creates another distribution known as a counterfactual distribution. We incorporate the fact in our methodology that the observational and counterfactual systems are not identically distributed. So if we want to use this model for forecasting, we need a counterfactual model. This counterfactual model is based on the current system where some causal mechanisms based on our intervention, based on our policies, are changed. But the noise variables between the factual and counterfactual model remain unchanged. This model, the counterfactual model, consists of the three levels: abduction, manipulation, and prediction. In the following slide, I'm gonna explain these three levels. The first level is abduction. In abduction, we try to infer the noise distribution. For some, we consider another form of causal mechanisms for each mechanism in our causal structure to identify the noise distribution. As you can see here, this noise for the second form, the noise distribution completely depends on the latent space, and so by comparing these two forms, we can estimate epsilon and the noise distribution. Here we develop the flow-based variational autoencoder structure by incorporating the normalizing flow techniques into variational autoencoder. The reason we use normalizing flow here is that in variational autoencoder, we simply consider the normal distribution for the latent space. But here, we wanted to transfer this simple distribution to the complex distribution representing our dataset. Maybe in our dataset, we have subpopulation. We have different unobserved variable distribution. And so we need to measure this distribution. So the output of the abduction level is noise distribution. Then after this, we need to manipulate our system. In the manipulation system, we manipulate the current system, we intervene in the current system, either in the hardware or software. In the hardware, we completely remove the incoming links to the variable of the interest, or set the value of the variable to the specific value, or like here, we the causal mechanism functionality are changed. And then, based on these changes in the causal structure, we create the interventional structural causal model, and finally use this model for estimating the counterfactual outcome. This picture shows how the generative counterfactual model works. As you can see, we have the flow-based variational autoencoder structure to estimate the noise distribution. Then we manipulate the system, and again the same structure like the interpretable deep causal model to predict the counterfactual outcome. Now I'm going to show how our models works in our case study. To evaluate our models, we use two case studies: pedestrian waiting time in the presence of automated vehicles, and the travel behavior choices. In case study, in the first case study, we use a virtual reality data set because our scenario is futuristic scenario. We analyze pedestrian waiting time in the presence of automated vehicles. Our data set consists of the road-related attributes, traffic condition, and environmental situation gathered during the experiments. Also, our data set includes social demographic and travel pattern information collected by questionnaires. And also, during the experiment, we use the galvanic skin response to collect pedestrian stress level during their crossing. And for the second case study, we use the London data set. We just focus on the non-mandatory trips collected from April 2012 to March 2015. And this data set consists of social demography and travel attributes, and also trip trajectories corresponding their mode alternatives. For these two case studies, we found these causal structures by using the fast-security equivalence research. This is the score-based causal discovery algorithm. We also add some prior knowledge to identify this causal structure. For instance, we restrict any relationship between age and gender, but we allowed to have any relationship between age and driving license. I mean that we restrict the unreasonable relationship between the variables. With the glance at this causal structure, we can found that for policy assessments, we need causality analysis. Because in transportation, in typical travel behavior modeling, we consider all variables as a contributing factors of the outcome, and then based on the significance of variables, we consider that keep them or remove them from the model. But here, as you can see, there are different approaches, the different relationship actually between the variables. In these two causal structures, some variables play roles as exogenous variables, and some others play roles as both exogenous and endogenous variables. Another thing that is very interesting is that, for instance, if you look at car access, there is no any direct relationship between the car access and waiting time. But the number of the cars in the household may affect stress level, and the stress level may waiting time. But in typical transportation modeling, we usually condition on all variables. And once, for instance, in this case, if we condition on the stress level, we block the effect of the car access on the waiting time. So if we are interested in the effect of the car access on the waiting time, by conditioning on the stress level, we can find them. So that's why I'm saying that we need causality analysis for policy assessment. In our research, we compare the Carolina with a simple structural causal model. Actually, the only difference between Carolina and structural causal model is that in the structural causal model, we don't have any deep component. It's just based on the multinomial logit model and simple order logit model. We compare these two models based on the AIC because the number of the parameters due to the deep learning algorithm in Carolina much higher than the structural causal model, and we considered the penalty and then compared these two models. And in terms of the accuracy, as you can see, the Carolina effectively outperforms that structural causal model. For instance, in travel mode, you can see the big difference between the prediction of the Carolina and the simple structural causal model. In our study, we investigate two interventions for both case study. For the first case study, we explore how individual decisions would have changed if we externally reduced the stress level and set that to the low level. And in the case study of travel behavior, London travel behavior, we analyze how people's preference would have been influenced if we provide recreational amenities like restaurants, shopping malls within 5 miles from their origin, meaning that we set the travel distance to the median. By using the abduction level, we found the noise distribution, and this figure shows the unobserved variable distribution. As you can see in our model, we have the multi-model distribution, meaning that our data set consists of multiple subpopulations having different unobserved behavior. And in addition to that, we use the counterfactual model structure to predict human behavior in the future. This matrix shows that how individual preference change if we intervene in the system. For instance, and for case of pedestrian waiting time, as you can see, approximately 38% of individual change their waiting time from high to low. And in the counterfactual world, for travel mode choice, once we intervene in the system and provide close and recreational amenity, 45% of individuals change their travel mode choice. Until here, I show how the deep learning algorithms help us to improve our structural causal model. But here, I want to show you why we need the causality analysis, why we need to first learn the causal structure and then apply that in the structural causal model. We use the simulated data set. This figure shows the behavioral generating process in the simulated data set. As you can see, age and gender here a common cause between waiting time and stress level, and based on the causal inference discipline, we need to condition on that to block the non-causal path between the wait time and stress level. But we have another variable, density perception. Here, density perception plays roles as a collider, meaning that if we condition on this variable, we create a path between the wait time and the stress level. Or in other words, we open this non-causal path. In typical approach, we condition on all these variables in the conventional approach, but in Carolina, we follow this causal structure. And as you can see, although in Carolina we still have the error, but this error is much lower than the conventional approach. Because once we want to measure the effect of stress level on waiting time, by conditioning on the density propensity, we create another path between these two variables. And so in the conventional approach, we are measuring the combination of the causal and non-causal path. But in Carolina, we isolate the non-causal path completely. I talk about everything that I wanted to cover in this my presentation. Just to conclude, Carolina effectively addressed the challenge of interpretability and causality in our study. The counterfactual model structure facilitates the policy assessment in transportation studies. We showed that Carolina outperforms the simple structural causal model thanks to the deep component in its structure. Also, we use the simulated data set to show the difference between the association-based approach and the causal-based approach, in which we try to overcome the effect of the confounding variables. And also, by keeping the interpretability of model, we guarantee that copula model can be as complete as the other econometric models. For the future work, we need to consider the effect of the unobserved variables in the factual work, because here we use the causal discovery, the algorithm that is completely based on the sufficiency. We assume that our observational data consists enough information to get the causal structure, but in the future we can apply other approaches to consider the unobserved confounders. In addition to this, importantly, we need to evaluate the feasibility of the idea of generative counterfactual model by using some approaches like backcasting. We can use the temporal data set, go from the future to the present, and then evaluate the feasibility of our idea in the counterfactual model. We can use different causal discovery algorithm. Here we just use one algorithm to find the causal structure. And also regarding the deep learning aspect, we can apply regularization techniques and some techniques for tuning the hyperparameters to improve the performance of our deep learning based model. Actually in our model, because we wanted to compare our model with the traditional model, with a simple model, we didn't apply any regularization techniques. So for improving the performance of our model, we can apply the regularization techniques as well. Thank you so much for your attention. Feel free if you have any questions. Thank you.